All right, so now I want to talk about all of this. And let me bring on renowned criminal defense attorney Bradford Cohen. Bradford, so good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. First of all, I want to go over what we just saw in this court appearance. Why was there a protective order issued for Erica Kirk, right? Charlie Kirk's widow, the victim's widow in this case. What is that about? Yeah, it's not unusual. It's usually typical in these type of cases where even if the individual is not getting a bond, the prosecutor always asks for a stay-away order or a non-cont order. And why they do that is because just in case a third party is contacting, like they don't want someone calling from jail and speaking to their father, their mother. Not that that would happen in this case, but I'm just saying in any case, they don't want them speaking to anyone else and saying, hey, you should really have a discussion on with Erica or see if she will back off the death penalty or anything like that. And that's why they enter these orders. And it's typical in these type of cases. It's not just typical in these type of cases. It's typical in any kind of violent crime whatsoever. Is that also because he's been charged with obstruction and witness tampering? There's an emphasis on making sure that nobody harasses her or tries to talk to her in any way. Sure. I think that can be one of the reasons. Like I said, I think it's very typical, especially in high pro. So I've had high profile cases across the board where, especially in high profile cases, they don't want anyone that is related to the case contacting the victim's family or any of the immediate people that are around him, friends, anything like that. And this is, it's a really horrible case. So I didn't expect them not to do that. Let me put it that way. I thought that they would have something in effect that would say, don't contact either his wife, his kids, or any of the immediate family. By the way, the court ruled that he was indigent, and they have appointed him a Rule 8. It's appointment of counsel under Utah law. He can't afford his own attorney. Very interesting, because it seems at this point he's not getting any financial support from family or friends. Were you surprised to hear that? Not really. I think that at this point, this individual is persona non grata with everyone. I don't see his family really stepping up and paying for an attorney for him, not knowing what I know, if it is true, what the discussions he had with his father, the discussions he had with another sheriff that ended up helping him surrender. I'm not surprised that he doesn't have the money or that his family's not going to give him the money. It would also not shock me if some of these fringe, real left-wing organizations might come up with money to donate to him. In these cases, it's really quite interesting where individuals that have allegedly committed horrible crimes are either supported by different organizations or they get love letters suddenly and they're somehow put on a pedestal. And you see that in quite a few cases where the evidence is overwhelming, but there's still this need to support this individual because people support, quote unquote, the cause that this individual allegedly stood for. And you see that with Mannion in New York, where he's getting amazing support and allegedly, he point blank assassinated a guy with 2 kids and a wife. So you see that quite often in these cases, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it. I think it's going to be very difficult to find a defense attorney that is going to be willing to put themselves on the line for this. And that's always difficult because as defense attorneys, it's almost like a doctor, right? We're sworn to uphold the law and an oath to take cases. I personally take cases that I feel very vehemently about. I take cases that I'm passionate about. This type of case obviously is going to be very difficult to find a defense attorney that's going to be passionate about it. And I'll get back to the defense in a second. They mentioned September 29th, 10 a.m. is a waiver hearing where he can decide if he wants to waive a preliminary hearing. Correct. So in Utah, there's a preliminary hearing where the prosecutor presents evidence to, is there enough probable cause to move this forward to trial? If the judge says there is, then it goes into an arraignment, and then he will enter his plea of guilty or not guilty. Any advantage to waive a preliminary hearing or not waive a preliminary hearing? I can't imagine what the advantage would be to waive it, because wouldn't you kind of want to hear what the government's evidence is? Yeah, you're spot on. So in districts where they have preliminary hearings, there's quite a few, California being one, you don't want to waive your preliminary hearing, because at the preliminary hearing, that's where you really start to figure out, okay, what are the witnesses going to say? What evidence do they have? What are they going to present? And don't forget, at a preliminary hearing, the state is also kind of playing these little games where they don't want to put on every bit of evidence, but obviously they want to show the strength of their case and the strength of the evidence that they have against the individual. And it's a very low burden to show that there is probable cause to arrest and charge this individual with the crime that they're charging him with. So that usually isn't the issue. Really, the issue here is going to be whether or not they want to put on this kind of dog and pony show when they know kind of the evidence that's already out there. My opinion is you have to. I think it's malpractice not to and waive that preliminary hearing. I think that would be a huge mistake in a case where it's this large. But again, you know, the evidence that I've seen, it's going to be a very difficult case for anyone to say that this was not him. So that brings me to now what happened today, right? They have listed a number of charges against him. It's not necessarily right. Did he do it, right? Is he guilty of doing it? Is he guilty of aggravated murder? Is he guilty of obstruction? Is he guilty of witness tampering? I will tell you, I was talking about this before. There is a mountain of evidence. I mean, if they say that they have the DNA, his DNA on the rifle and the towel and on the trigger and the bullet casings, and they go back and found a search warrant and go to his house and they find engravings on a shell casing that match the other engravings. And then you have the parents who may be potential witnesses. You have this conversation with this roommate. You and I both know that text message conversations are such key evidence. I don't know how you say it's ambiguous. I mean, he allegedly admitted it's him, said why he did it, talked about things arguably maybe only the killer would know about the rifle and the engravings. But at the same time, from a defense perspective, is the name of the game going to be, we try to have none of that evidence come in. And if it does come in, we say it doesn't meet the elements, the V, rise specific elements of aggravated murder or enhancements that he's facing, you know, like with children being present or this being a killing done for political expression. I mean, is that the name of the game here? Yeah, I think the name of the game is to mitigate it as much as possible. That would be my guess. The only advantage when we're talking about preliminary hearings, the only advantage of waiving it would be if there was some sort of negotiation to take the death penalty off the table and not have to put people through a preliminary hearing. I don't see that happening in this case. I think that the only thing that they can do is mitigate the circumstances. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are flying online. I've seen the videos. I've seen the evidence in terms of what they're presenting. I've read the PC affidavit. I've read those texts. I think that it's almost an impossible task to say that he did not do this. And the admission to his father, the gun that was given to him by his grandfather, the grandfather's probably going to come in and be a witness. The father himself, obviously they have very different political views from the text and things of that nature that he relayed to his roommate. I don't see this being anything but a mitigation type case where you're saying, okay, maybe the aggravators don't meet the requirement. Maybe it's not witness tampering. But even with witness tampering, it's not really a stretch when you're telling people, hey, get rid of text, delete the message, don't talk. Yeah. And not only that, they're going to triangulate these phones. They're going to know exactly where he was and when he was there. This is going to be a mountain of evidence. You'd have to live on a different planet or be a complete moron to think that there's some way to walk this guy. There is no way to walk this. And I just want to give you a caveat. Yes, I am slightly biased in this case because I have met Charlie Kirk many times at different events, and then no matter what you feel about someone's political views or even their personal views, he was just a good kid to talk to, funny kid, knowledgeable kid. And those are the things hopefully are not lost in these cases where, you know, you just simply talk about, you know, the evidence against the defendant and the defendant himself. Hopefully that does not get lost in this case. And this is a real tragedy. Not that any murder is a good murder, but this was a tragedy because it was what we consider someone who is just someone that's off the battlefield. He's just someone who was giving his opinion on things and was murdered because of his opinion. And I say the same thing about with the Mannion case in the sense that I don't care if you hated Charlie Kirk. I don't care if you disagreed with every single thing that he said. Murder is wrong. Murder can never be the answer. And for those who are not convinced by that argument, what would you say if someone else who has a different opie, Neon, then you says, you know what? You deserve to die. Your hero deserves to die because of their opinions. This becomes a very slippery slope. I said it with Mannion. I'll say it now. It doesn't just end with health insurance executives. It goes to politics. It goes to real estate. It goes to this. It goes to that. There's a lot of enemies in society. It can't turn to violence. Okay, I get off my soapbox because it was a good soapbox. From the defense, though, and look, the evidence, if they can present all of this and it comes into court, it's such a strong case. However, aggravated murder, they're trying to say it was a killing done in the commission of an incident. There were circumstances where it presented a grave risk of death to others. The idea of firing a shot. Yes, Charlie Kirk was the target, but you're firing a shot into an open crowd. Is there room for a defense to say, I don't think that's aggravated murder? Is there grounds to say, was this really a killing done for political expression? Yes, he was killed, right? As he's talking about gun violence, right? As he's talking about the transgender community, a killing done in the presence of children. They focused a lot about that. Again, going back to these elements look what just happened with Mannion. They threw out some of his charges because they said they weren't terrorism. It didn't fit the definition. Is that what we're talking about here? That's the only thing that they can argue. I think it's going to be very difficult. Like I said, there's a couple things at play, right? The first thing at play is whether or not there is case law in Utah that this meets the criteria, right? One shot in a large crowd that's aimed specifically at one individual, is that going to be cons? Either aggravated murder. I don't know of any case law that stands for either for or against that. I think that it's going to be a difficult case because of that. And then I think the secondary thing, that it's a difficult case in these high-profile cases. I was surprised, not shocked, in the Manome case, because I thought the terrorism charge was a little unusual in that case, the state terrorism charge, because of the way that went down as opposed to this. There were children present, right? This was a big gathering of 3,000 people that brought kids and brought other individuals to this event. I think that's the only thing they have, is to argue those things. And how far does it get them, though, right? At the end of the day, let's say you eliminate some of those things. It's still a first-degree murder case. It's still a death penalty case. Even without those things, I think there's still enough aggravators. Yeah. Where it's still going to be a death penalty case. So it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze on that? Maybe to a defense attorney to try and chalk one up on the board. Maybe it's worth trying to argue that, hey, this isn't a witness tampering case, or this isn't aggravated murder. It's just regular murder. I don't know. I think that's the only argument they're going to have at a preliminary hearing. But I think more of the same path is that they're going to the preliminary hearing just to see what is out there, see the evidence that they have, and then kind of try and put together some kind of case. I think ultimately they're going to beg to take the death penalty off the table, and I think this is very difficult, right? I think the family is going to have to discuss it. I think they're going to weigh very heavily on the Kirk family. I think Erica Kirk is going to have a voice in that, and whether or not she believes that this individual should be put to death or not put to death. I have my own view on those things, but I'm not the victim's family in this case. And I think that she will have her own view and go according to her religious beliefs and things of that nature. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if Erica would say, to take that off the table. It's a very difficult thing to go forward with. Then he would have to agree to plead guilty to the most severe charges. He would have to agree to plead guilty to the enhancements. One of the reasons they're really moving for these handheldments, because if you look at aggravated murder under Utah law, there can be life and without parole. There can be life, there can be an indeterminate term of not less than 25 years that may be for life, so 25 to life. If they're like, we're going to take the death penalty off, you're going to prison for the rest of your life that would be the only yes. Yeah. That would be the only thing I could imagine, is that he would plead to life without parole over a death penalty sentence. Listen, in this type of case, unless there's other mitigators that I don't know about, it's a horrible, horrible case. And there's arguments on both sides of the the coin death penalty, not death penalty, when you're the victim's family. I don't think I find very few people would say, hey, I don't want the death penalty, but the Kirk family is unique, and I think that they have strong religious beliefs. I'm not sure where that's going to fall, but I'm sure they'll make the right decision. Real quick before I let you go, federal charges, is that on the table? I'm trying to struggle with what the federal charges would be, if there are any. So the gun obviously was not made in the state that it was fired in. There's federal charges that you could bring for interstate commerce, and also if there was some sort of political that you associated with a political murder. There's some charges that you could fit for this kind of case. I don't know if that's the route that they're going. I think they're going to see. Again, I think this is very driven by Charlie's family and a discussion with Charlie's family. I don't think anyone is just going to make the move without a discussion with Charlie's family and he's got a great family that meets and talks, and I'm sure they've had many discussions here. It was very tough to watch that funeral, and I'm sure they'll make the right choice of how to move this forward. I don't know. Are there federal charges that could be filed? Yes. Will they be filed? Again, I think that the driver of this is going to be Charlie's family. And I didn't know that you knew Charlie and had that connection. So I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for what's been happening in the past. He was a very funny guy. He was a good kid. He was a good kid. And this is a real shame. Like I said, doesn't matter what your beliefs are. And I have friends and both sides of the aisle, and I'm friendly with Democrats or Republicans. Thanks for watching my video. Please like and subscribe for my channel and stick with me for more content.